Hello, Taylor Ellwood with Magical Experiments, and today we're going to discuss cultural appropriation. Yes, Virginia, cultural appropriation does exist. I know that's hard to believe, but it does exist. And I say that as a white male with, tons of privilege on my side. Um, Unearned privilege, I might add. So what is cultural appropriation? Let's talk about that. Well, first of all, in the very nifty book Talking About the Elephant, which is an anthology of neo-pagan perspectives on cultural appropriation edited by Lupa, there are many useful articles that explore the topic of cultural appropriation from a wide variety of people, and I highly recommend picking it up if you're not sure what cultural appropriation is. But let me give you what I think of as cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation is the taking of cultural practices, techniques, but also hairstyles and other things, cultural artifacts from another culture in a manner that doesn't recognize that you are actually appropriating, you are taking from that culture. It has not been given to you, it has not been shared with you. This is different from cultural sharing. So cultural sharing is when a representative from a culture chooses to share information from that culture with other cultures. For example, um, there is an author I'm reading right now, Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, who writes books upon Dzogchen, which is Tibetan meditation practices. He has chosen to write these books, and he has chosen to share them with a Western audience, and he's chosen to teach classes on it. So consequently, it's not, I don't think that that is cultural appropriation. He is culturally sharing techniques and concepts from his culture with other people that aren't of his culture. But let's say you're a white person walking down the street and you have your hair in dreadlocks, and you're thinking, hey, how cool. That is cultural appropriation. Why? Well, because there is a lot of political and cultural values associated with that hairstyle that have nothing to do with being a white person, but have everything to do with being a person of color. And if you, as a white person, do not understand that, or you think you understand, but let's be brutally honest here, you don't, because you're white and you have tons of privilege and have never experienced anything along those lines, it's cultural appropriation. It's not cultural sharing. And yeah, you may look exotic and cool and everything else, but let's even focus on that word exotic. That in and of itself is an example right there of cultural appropriation. You're choosing to look this specific way because it's something that's different and exciting and makes you maybe feel a little bit like a rebel. Well, guess what? You're really not. You're just stealing from someone else's culture. And you might say, well, who gets to say that? Don't I, as a white person, get to say something about that? Well, no, you really don't, because guess what? You have privilege. You don't get to say anything about that. The people who get to say something about it, are the people who actually have to deal with the reality of not having the same level of privilege, and in fact being treated differently because of their hairstyle, or their skin color, or something else. So, don't go in and argue that cultural appropriation doesn't exist, because guess what? It does exist. And it exists in ways that can be considered to be microaggressions, where, whether you even consciously realize it or not, you are essentially being racist. Now, I know. Lots of white people like to believe that they're not racist. Well, guess what? The reality is that we all have a bit of racism in us. And by we all, I mean all of us white people. Um, Racism is a systemic institution. Say that 5 times fast, right? And it is the result of centuries of oppression toward people of color. And it's not the same as prejudice, okay? Racism is a systemic institution that is designed to put one type of people over another type of people. In this case, white people over people of color. And whether we white people realize it or not, we have racist perspectives that color our interactions with people. This is where microaggressions come out. And it's on us, not the people of color, it's on us to own that and recognize it and do the necessary internal work to see it for what it is. And part of that is recognizing cultural appropriation for what it is. So, to recap, yes, Virginia, cultural appropriation does exist. And you know what? If you're a white person, you don't get to say what is or isn't cultural appropriation when it comes to something such as dreadlocks. The people who get to say that are the people who actually have the experience and the relevant cultural background. And that's the reality. So, have a comment or a thought or an opinion, feel free to share below. And if you found this video helpful, please subscribe.